Now,
Befriended me on Facebook.
Facebook status update. Facebook. Getting on Twitter.
a show helping to expose the power of social media.
You can go on Facebook.
Say you write on Facebook. On Facebook.
This is the Tonya Hall Show.
My Facebook account was deleted by the man.
Now, here's Tonya Hall.
Welcome to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web. Everything that's happening on the internet today, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or much more. We talk about social business, social marketing, world events, and much more. Our guest today is going to be Richard Binhammer. He is the founder and principal of Social Business and Corporate Communications Consulting. It's kind of a mouthful. We're going to talk to him about what he's doing today. The last time we had Richard on the show, he was with Dell. He's gone on to do bigger and better things, helping businesses with their social strategy, content marketing, basically this idea of just even connecting internally the challenges of social business all the way to creating content and the flood and avalanche of content we have today. Before we get to that, I want to talk about what happened yesterday. Huge news in the social space. And I think what it proves is how connected we are to social media and how much that affects our economy. Yesterday, after our show at approximately about 1 p.m., a false tweet went out because of a hack situation. So a hacker hacked into the Associated Press Twitter account. And they sent out a false tweet. Basically, the tweet was something like this. See if I can find it. Here we go. There had been 2 explosions at the White House, and that the President, Barack Obama, was injured. The attack on the Associated Press Twitter account and its mobile account was preceded by phishing attempts on the AP's corporate network. I spent some time this morning chatting back and forth with Eric Carvin. Eric Carvin is the social media editor at Associated Press. And what happened was Twitter immediately took down the account. But as soon as that tweet went out and it was starting to spread, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the Dow fell 143 points immediately when that tweet went out. So what it tells us, right, is that we're listening to social media, and when social media reports something, that's going to affect our economy. So it's kind of scary as far as I'm concerned. I mean, think about, other types of hacks that could take place. Now, of course, Twitter announced this morning that they are working on a 2-part verification system to try and make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. They're still testing it internally. Wired reported on it. It's in fact, if you Google Twitter verification, you'll get quite a few stories, because this hasn't just happened to Associated Press. This has happened to the BBC, 60 Minutes, other news sources, and certainly there have been brands that have been hacked as well. We've seen that happen. I think Jeep was hacked, and a lot of other businesses and brands have been subjected to being hacked. Now, the Associated Press hack was claimed by the Syrian Electronic Army. They claimed responsibility, but when I talked to Associated Press, they could not verify that that was actually true. But here's the thing. So if you have ill intentions and you hack a very trusted resource, what does that mean? And does that affect the trusted resource? So is it going to be in the future that we don't trust the source that we trusted in the past? I mean, Associated Press is where everybody gets their news and information, right? I mean, it's an incredibly trusted resource. And with over 2,000 journalists, there's all kinds of possibility, right, for someone finding out your password. We're going to hopefully have them come on and talk a little bit about kind of how this played out and what that actually does to affect their business. But it's just a little scary. Again, the Dow fell 143 points. Now, it did recover, but what does that say about how in business we follow social media and we follow the news? And so, again, they are back up and running. In fact, they've already got their Twitter account reestablished and all of their followers reinstated. We're going to take a really quick time out, but when we do, we're going to come back with Richard Binhammer, and we're going to talk about this flow of content, this flood of content. In fact, I think he refers to it on his website as an avalanche of content, very appropriate for Colorado, and the future of filtering. So how in the future can we filter some of the content? I think when we looked at the Boston Marathon and all of the content we were getting, we're overloaded. We're at a pivotal change, and Richard and I are going to talk about that, as well as internal challenges of social business, what businesses are doing to tackle the internal dialogue and how they get their team on board. Stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. We'll be right back after this quick timeout.
Bathing my memory mind in the wetness of its soul. Feeling the amber current flowing from my mind. And warm and empty heart you left so cold. Whiskey River, take my mind. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show, where our guest today is Richard Binhammer. Richard Binhammer is a well-known social media consultant. He's certainly worked for Fortune, Dell. Who all have you worked for, Richard? You've got a long career in social media. When did you get your start?
No, 2006 with Dell.
And you've been on your own now for what?
About 3 months.
So are you on the road again now? I mean, I think this is an appropriate Willie Nelson song, right? For you?
Yeah, I guess I should have told you, I'm going to a Willie Nelson concert next week, so I think that's why we're getting the Willie Nelson music, huh?
Yeah, well, we're feeling a little Willie connection for you, definitely. You know, I told you I grew up in Texas. I remember Willie Nelson, and he's definitely an icon, right?
Yep, very much so.
As are you. You know, you and I talked quite a bit this morning, and we talked last night a little bit about this, but this whole Associated Press hacking. I mean, we've seen hackings, into Twitter accounts and Facebook, and certainly it can be pretty detrimental if you're not ready. I mean, Twitter reacted very quickly. Twitter actually took down the Associated Press Twitter account. It's been since reinstated, and Twitter, of course, announced this morning that they're coming out with a 2-part verification. But it's kind of scary that we saw such an effect on the stock market, right? I mean, that shows you real-time effect of social media and our finance, or the finances in our company and our country. Yeah,
it certainly is one thing that goes to prove, I think, that social media is, a very serious, quote-unquote, serious thing. Today, it's not something that we can just kind of play around with in the past, and that it has, it also goes to prove that there's really, significant value or impact of social media across all aspects of our lives. I mean, now we've seen it on the impact on the stock market. The Boston Marathon bombings, we saw a significant impact of it as well, through the use of social media in terms of how all of that played out, rightly or wrongly, in terms of, rumor mongering and, the police having to ask people not to tweet off their scanners that are available through social media and all this kind of thing. So, I think it shows, whether you're talking about the AP being hacked or the Boston situation or the stock market, social media is really starting to play a pretty significant and real impact across all of our lives. And it's not just a business thing.
Well, and the fall actually created a buying opportunity. So it could have really changed business in a significant way. It came back up pretty quickly. But I think, you talked about the Boston Marathon, you talk about this overflow of information. So we have issues, so here's all the conversation around content marketing, right? So, the content that we get, where we get our news, Associated Press, trusted resource, they're hacked and people are reposting the information. It affects the stock market. We've got media outlets listening to your point with the Boston Marathon, listening to police scanners. And so, information gets reported from police scanners, and the Brown student that was falsely accused His name is he's probably afraid to leave his house at the time, because people are misreporting the news. And it comes down to this. It comes down to, how do we really trust the information that we're getting over the web? Because as Kevin pointed out, as you noticed when we started the show a few seconds late, because we were having some, real-time radio, we were having some, technical problems with our computers. And, Kevin's like, man, in the day, it was this way. And in the day, we had a printed newspaper that was delivered to our doorstep, and it was fully vetted news. And by the time we got it, it wasn't necessarily brand new. It was maybe, several hours old, but we could trust it. At least we felt like we could. But now it seems like all of our information we're getting so quickly, and major outlets like CNN and others certainly got raked through the coals over this Boston Marathon. So how do we solve that, Richard? How do we solve this overflow of information?
Yeah, obviously I don't know all the questions or answers to how we solve it. But the other thing that we've also got in all of that mix, Tonya, is if you go beyond questions about the media and kind of the real-time information and what do you trust and what don't you trust, the other aspect of this is, we now also have every business stepping up to be a quote-unquote content marketer, and everybody believing, that they need to be pushing content all the time as opposed to, figuring out ways to kind of pull. And so now we've got this whole avalanche information that goes beyond the traditional trusted source, but also maybe a brand that you trust or friends and people that you trust. And so now we've got a big mix of stew of more trusted sources reporting on more things, and often, our friends that we depend on and our own interests lead us only to read certain things as opposed to, broader things. And does that mean also that we only get one point of view and, aren't open to other points of view? So there's a whole series, I think, of issues here that go beyond, who do you trust, but also how do you filter and how do you know it's real?
Well, exactly. How do you know it's real? Is it the idea of being first, which I think we saw with the Boston Marathon? It was immediate information, or is it being accurate? And I would say accuracy, right? I mean,
right.
And you and I talked about this morning. We've talked about it during the Boston Marathon. I've been talking about this for years. As soon as we started seeing digital influence scoring, I wanted to see some sort of scoring around journalism, around reporting, around the news. And even if you're an outlet that has a particular slant towards the news, so maybe if you're slanting because your site slants one way, but it's at least all actually accurate, right? It's not misreporting. I mean, I think there needs to be some sort of cred or clout score for journalism. What do you say?
Well, then they get into the question, I think, Tonya, of who's going to do that, right? And, that becomes a problem, too. I mean, traditionally what we've said is let the market decide that, right? So the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal really kind of were, whether you like their perspectives or not, but the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have always been about trusted resources, not because someone verified them, but because the market claimed them to be the trusted resource for news.
But everyone's definition of that, to your point, is different. I mean, I might feel like the news is better coming from Fox, right? From
Right. But I'm saying in terms of print media, I mean, who's going to verify that Fox is your trusted resource? Are you asking government to verify that?
Oh,
or are you
absolutely
asking,
not.
No, but that's what I'm saying is, to your point about the verification. And look, the AP account was a verified source by Twitter. It so happens that it got hacked. So, you still got the problem.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this idea of the government controlling. I mean, because you and I talked about this.
Yep.
I think this needs to be monitored by the business community. I think this is a great opportunity. I'm not an engineer. I don't build apps, but I think this is an opportunity for somebody to come in. Now, I don't know how to do that. I don't know the best way of doing that, but Richard, where's the pivotal shift?
But that's what I'm saying is that already, for example, Twitter verifies Twitter handles, right? and just because it's verified, the Burger King account, the Jeep account, they can still get hacked and produce false things. So to your point about how do you verify someone needs, you need to have a clout score for journalism. Well, what, you're just going to establish some kind of, we don't even understand how clout works today. So therefore, what makes clout real versus, peer index or cred or any of the other things that go to identify influence?
Then how do we filter? How do we filter the content then?
Well, I think filtering is a whole nother question. So one, you've got verification and questions of truth or trust, but then you also got the question of filtering and how do we sort through all this information, which I think is a whole nother issue, really, because today people are creating 70 times the amount of information in the Library of Congress daily, and that's showing up on the web. And that's an awful lot of information. How do you and I sort through all of that?
Well, exactly, and you've got some solutions. There's some tech tools that I think you recommend that people use, and again, we're at this pivotal shift of an overload, as you call it, an avalanche of content. And how do we filter it based on our needs, whether it's business information, and then this idea of how we're creating content. So what is the difference between journalism and advertorial? And those seem to be so much more blended today. And we're going to talk about that with our guest, Richard Binhammer. Stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. Happy birthday, Kelly Clarkson. We'll be right back after this timeout.
Just the good old boys, never meaning no harm. Beats all you ever saw, been in trouble with the law since the day they was born.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show with our guest today, Richard Binhammer, who is the principal and founder of Social Business and Corporate Communications Consulting. That is a mouthful, Richard. Not as much of a mouthful as Happy Birthday, Kelly Clarkson, which you gave me a hard time about when we went to break. It's her birthday. She's turning 31. It popped up on Facebook.
You're right. It's important to say that on your way out there to break.
I was a little random, as Kevin pointed out, but it popped up. I was like, well, happy birthday, Kelly. So, you and I talked at length about this idea, and I think you made a really good point, and I want to own it here. I want to let everybody know what we're talking about this idea that as consumers, we actually already show our, trusted resources, right, for journalism. And you made a point of talking about in the past, it was by subscription. But I don't know that same rule applies today because we don't subscribe the same way that we did in the past. Right, Richard? Right.
And I think, as if we've got a daily production of content, and information across the web that's 70 times what's in the Library of Congress, and that's happening daily, then the question becomes, well, how do we sort that out? Obviously, you go to your trusted resource, which may be, something like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, just as examples. Then the question also becomes, Tonya, you and I and other people that are involved in social media, we also depend on what we read or see, the links that we're viewing, in our Facebook and Twitter feeds, right? So that becomes kind of another trusted source of information is because our friends are sharing it. And then what we find is, in this avalanche information, we now have kind of a third thing going on, which is, you've got applications like Flipboard or, more specifically things like Trove and Trapit and the one that news.me, which gives you a daily kind of what your friends, kind of siphons through your Twitter feed, news.me siphons through your Twitter feed, and basically shows you the links that were most shared by the most of your friends, kind of gives you the top 5 links of the day or whatever. Or something like, my favorite is actually Get Prismatic, getprismatic.com, which does a combination of you telling it what your interests are as well as going through your Twitter feed and your Facebook feeds, and then it surfaces the best content based on your interests and what your friends are sharing into a news feed. And so these filters, I think, are becoming another way of kind of sorting through this avalanche information. And then if you reverse engineer that, then you have to think about, really, content marketing only works if it's really being shared by all of your friends. And I've been doing a couple interesting things, actually, with some of these apps, which is on some of them you can subscribe to content by topic, and then you can also choose to subscribe to a publisher. And what becomes interesting is that you look at what the publisher, what the content marketer, what the company is putting out versus what is actually showing up in the news feed, and you start to see, that a lot of what we publish is not necessarily getting shared or getting very much traction. And that's a problem, for everybody that's jumping on the content bandwagon.
So Twitter obviously is a huge resource for a lot of us to get information because we're following media people, whether it's a media personality, maybe it's a business, or maybe it's like the Associated Press.
But it's not about the media. It's about the people that you're following and what links they're sharing, too.
Exactly. Well, okay, but not everybody's on Twitter. I mean, I know CEO of Twitter, Dick Costello, is working to establish Twitter as a viable business, and they're preparing for potentially going public. And so they're ready to move forward. There's still issues like this, though, with hacking. And there's issues with sharing a content that isn't, and I'm guilty as well. I think we've all been there where we may have shared something at some point because we trusted a resource. But again, how do we, just because I think Twitter puts the little verification symbol on your Twitter profile, we talked about this recently. Jack's parents don't even have Twitter verification on their Twitter account. So what does it really mean? I mean, again, it goes back to how are we vetting the sources where we're getting information?
But that's one of the things that we're doing. That's what I'm saying, Tonya, is one of the things that we're doing, I think, is we're trusting our friends. You're trusting your Twitter feed because they're your friends. That's one of the ways that you're verifying your information, is because you trust your friends. And then when that all pulls in on that basis, A, you can't verify it all, and B, this is where we start to get into this problem about everybody's creating so much information that we can't stay on top of it all. So, what becomes the next way to filter it? We did, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we filtered through Twitter. But now Twitter's generating so much information and Facebook's generating so much information, you almost need a filter of your Facebook and your Twitter feed. And then you filter it again, and then what shows up? It becomes very different situation. That's why I said, for example, if you do a news.me subscription via email, every morning on news.me, you get the 5 or 10 top stories that were shared by most of your friends on Twitter, the most shared stories on Twitter. So instead of reading your Twitter feed all the time, now you just go to news.me and you've put in another filter. And how do we keep filtering down to make it more manageable, and what do we lose in that process? And for content marketers, what's the implication for your content? Is that, people will continue to narrow, put in more filters, and therefore for everybody that now is a content marketer and pushing their content out all the time, it becomes more and more important that they look at the other side of the equation, which is how do you get your content marketing to really connect with communities?
Oh, well, and then, okay, let's talk about the integrity then of content marketing. In the past, you had PR firms that would want to promote a product, and then you would send the press release, if you will, to a media outlet, and they would decide and write a story based on, hopefully, based on the authenticity of the information, and they would give some unbiased, hopefully, feedback. Today, the PR companies are now, writing their own content. I mean, they're writing advertorials, if you will, but it's coming across as news. Is that something that is good for the industry, or is it muddying up the waters?
Yeah, I think time's going to tell. But again, what's the web premised on? The web's premised on the wisdom of the crowd, and if you're writing stuff that's complete BS, well, it's not going to last very long. And, we have seen that time and time again that, if you're not open, you're not transparent, you're not truthful and honest about what you're writing and actually connecting to your customers and to the people that matter to your company, and it's just kind of BS stuff that you're putting out there through a PR firm or whatever, you'll probably get caught. And you probably get called out for it, and we've seen that happen on different occasions.
Okay, so I was following. Well, I want to get your opinion on this. I was following a story this morning. I mentioned it to you briefly, and I certainly just want to make a statement that I don't advocate. I'm not supporting the pornography industry or anything like that. But that said, I was following on the BBC and some other European websites and journalistic outlets. And basically what's happening is the government is trying to put on internet filters for the purpose of protecting children. So they're trying to decide and screen out websites that they don't think that in public places, certainly.
Right. Which China's done for years.
Exactly. And that was my tweet this morning. What is this, China? I mean, but it scares me because we're suspect here in the United States too. I mean, I don't want someone telling me what I can and can't do. I think I told you this morning. I mean, I didn't eat salt or drink soda, big gulps or whatever before everybody started talking about I couldn't have one. So I don't want someone filtering the internet. But this is another kind of what you were talking about before with, is it possible that maybe as a business community, we can do a better job of this before the government tries to step in, whether it's news reporting or maybe it's I think, the business community's got, several challenges in front of it on this. One of them is, you got to make sure that your content is real and verifiable or, honest and trustworthy, or the community's going to call you out on it. And you won't be trusted, and it won't be shared, and therefore your content won't go anywhere. So there's lots of problems if your content is not authentic and real. The other part of that is that then you also have to figure out a way to make your content surface in, meaningful ways through people that appreciate it and value it, and give it some legs, because otherwise your content's just going to be lost in an avalanche. But I don't think it's a question of, the other point that this also relates to about, kind of government regulation. I mean, obviously the business community or anyone that's producing content has to worry about those things in order to be, continue to be responsible about it. The other side of that coin is also, something that we don't talk about often, especially as we look at the whole issue of big data. But you better be clear and responsible about how you're using customers' data as well on the web, or the government will step in and regulate that. I think is a whole other issue. Well, and Twitter, with its big announcement, the biggest ad deal they've signed yet, doing some of that very thing. So we're going to talk more about that. We're also going to talk about internal challenges that businesses have with their internal social business and their internal social strategy. Stay tuned to the Tonya Hall Show. Follow us on Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio, or find me on Facebook. We'll be right back.
Someday when we meet up yonder, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Don't let them pick guitars and drive them old trucks. Make them be doctors and lawyers and such.
Welcome back to the Tonya Hall Show, where we embrace the power of the web and how it's changing our lives with all the events that have happened over the last week and a half. We've been discussing those with our guest, Richard Binhammer, who is a consultant in the social media industry and has a long reputation of having good insight, especially on content marketing, which is probably at the core of a lot of what we're talking about, and verification. And I didn't tell you this, but Andrew Grill was posting on Facebook about this whole same conversation. He's the CEO at Cred. We've talked about Cred and Clout. And what you said, Richard, I thought was pretty interesting, is really, do we trust these sources already? I mean, do we trust them? Do we understand their algorithm? And what does that mean? And you said, be careful what you ask for, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I definitely think we're at some place where we need a little bit of understanding and what we're this overflow of content. And then there's this idea of social business. We haven't really gotten to that topic. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the internal social customer, right? And how businesses are tackling. I mean, you worked for a company that really turned around the social business approach. Dell really, restructured everything internally and externally, and came out with a really strong approach towards social business. What is it that businesses today are challenged with as it relates to their internal understanding of social business?
Yeah, I think there are lots of aspects. I mean, we could do a whole radio program on that itself, Tonya. But one of the things that I'm kind of that is a real challenge, I think, for business is social touches every aspect of the business. Really, when you think about it, right? It touches your customer service. It touches marketing. It touches your product sales or service sales. It touches innovation and customer ideas about, what would be a great new product. And then, Tonya, you get into the issue of, so now you got every part of your business being touched by customers' commentary on the social web. And how do you keep, how do you align all your internal different departments and silos to be doing social properly and to be working with each other? And it really kind of forces some issues around collaboration, coordination, and customer centricity, and it opens up business in a whole new way and across kind of every department. It used to be kind of that you had a customer, almost like a customer department. The people that actually touched the customer tended to be the service people and or the sales people, but now the customer touches every part of your business, and that's a big problem for a lot of businesses to kind of align around that and keep everything both coordinated and the collaboration across departments really becomes more and more forced, because people don't care about a department structure. They just care about the product or the service of the business. I think it's a huge challenge, and a lot of work to be done on that front as people continue down this social business kind of journey and try and deal with all of this, because we're so used to operating as silos.
The social business, if you will, typically falls under the responsibility of the chief marketing officer, whose role has completely changed. What is their big challenge right now? What do you think the challenge that's being presented, at least to the CMO, is today?
Well, I think one of the huge issues for any CMO is clearly making sense of the data. And I would say, generally speaking, I mean, you can learn something from the Obama campaign on this, and that's don't look for the perfect and don't look for the Holy Grail, but work with what you've got in order to really achieve results. And if you look at the Obama campaign and some of what they did with data, I mean, in some respects, they're further advanced in business on this front. That's one of the huge challenges for the CMO. The other one is where the CMO happens to kind of have this responsibility as it relates to social, I think, is, the kind of cross-departmental or cross-business silo coordination and collaboration that I alluded to earlier. But, the CMO can't do a good job of this on their own, because social media and social business really touches every aspect of the business. So, if the CMO doesn't have responsibility for customer support, but they better have a good social customer support program in place if they're going to be a legitimate social business. And the same with, how do you sort through the information from customers about what they want from your product or service that's going to make it better, which usually belongs, in the engineering department or the product innovation department or the labs of your business. And, again, that's usually not part of the CMO's responsibility. So, how do you make sure that that's happening even though it's beyond the realm of the CMO? And so social is so much more than social marketing. We also, for example, we kind of touched on this, but, look at corporate communications or public relations function. I mean, social touches how we tell our business stories beyond a news release and beyond a tweet, but actually enables direct relationships with people, not just audiences. And so again, if the CMO is in charge, what's the head of corporate communications doing about making sure that those new opportunities for direct relationships are occurring, as opposed to doing the traditional kind of third-party connections through media?
How important is the relationship between the business and the agency from the standpoint of promoting social? I mean, can you just trust that you can hire an agency and that's experienced and content strategy and social marketing, or should you have a dual team, or can you just bring it all in house?
Well, I think it all depends on the business, and I don't think that there's any particular single formula there that makes sense. If you look at it, you might have particular social competencies, if I can put it that way. And I'm going to have more about this in the next month or so, but you may have some particular social competency inside of the business, and therefore you might look to your agency to support you on places where you don't have that competency inside the business, or don't have the budget to hire that kind of high-level person to do that job, and therefore an agency becomes particularly important. So, and I think what you're going to find as social continues to mature and grow up is that this whole issue of agency versus the business itself is really, it's a bit of a misnomer, in the sense that there's probably, there are things for both, and it really depends on your partnership with your agency, as well as what the skills are that you have internally versus the skills that you need, and whether you can afford to hire them, or whether you're going to need to get some of the talent through your agency support. And in every business, you're going to find that that's very different.
If you don't really understand. Well, yeah, and I think it's such an evolution, right, of marketing, that
Yep.
I think a lot of heads of marketing don't really totally understand what really makes a good social business marketer. So how do they vet and hire the right employees?
I'm going to have, I think that really becomes a question of how do you assess your talent and your skills and the people, and look across your business at the different skills and talents that you've got, and then really make some decisions moving forward. And I've got more coming on that in about a month. A surprise.
A surprise. You're going to make us wait a month, Richard?
Yeah.
That isn't very nice. I can't believe you're going to make us wait. That's really bad. So, but you've got a lot of great content that's coming out on your website. In fact, your website launched, when was that? Very recently.
Just this week.
There you go. Just this week.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to go to your website, if they want to learn more about what it is, I'm tongue-tied, what it is that you're doing, maybe get some information about some of the topics we've discussed today and things that are coming up, how can they do that?
RichardBinhammer.com is the website, and I hope lots of people visit.
Well, I will certainly push them there,
because it's all new.
We'll promote it on social media, and because of Richard's request, he's asked me to find more birthdays to talk about. So Barbara Streisand, happy birthday, and Shirley MacLaine, happy birthday. See there, I did it for you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tonya.
And most importantly, happy birthday to my sister, Carrie, who's celebrating her birthday as well. See, a little behind the scenes on me, right?
Good stuff.
Thanks again, Richard, for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure, and have fun at that Willie Nelson concert.
Thanks, Tonya. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. That was Richard Binhammer. He is a former social media strategist at Dell. He's a consultant now and actually helps people understand a lot of things, including content marketing and strategy. Follow him on Twitter or follow me at Tonya Hall Radio. We'll be back tomorrow with Jason Falls. Stay tuned.